Coming in at number 10 is Dust. Created by Grant Morrison and Ethan Van Sciver for 2002's new X-Men number 133, Soraya Kadir is a young Muslim mutant who enrolled in the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning. She's largely been just a background character in the stories she shows up in, but Dust has been present for some of the largest events in the recent X-Men history. Soraya was even one of the mutants who kept their powers after M-Day. Now, Soraya is usually a pretty shy and quiet girl, but don't let that fool you. Her powers are no joke. Dust is able to transform into a cloud of sand and dust, and even act as a violent sandstorm, literally stripping the flesh from her opponents. When she couldn't properly control her power just yet, Dust even unintentionally flayed two men alive after unleashing her power in an act of self-defense. Dust has also been shown to use her power internally, meaning like inside of another person, entering her enemy's lungs and eroding them from the inside out, which is just a lovely thing to think about. But wait, there's more! It also appears that Dust is immune to magic and telepathy-based attacks in her sand form. The only problem is that if you pull out a hose or like a super soaker or something, she's pretty much done for, as she is extremely vulnerable to water. She is a powerful mutant, but sorely underutilized. Number 9. Marrow. Marrow! She's just such an underappreciated mutant considering how versatile and cool her powers are, and if you are a Marrow diehard fan, you know that she's had difficulties with her powers, which might explain part of the reason why people tend to write her off. Initially, Marrow was unable to control the growth of her bones, which leaves her with some pretty painful and frankly terrifying looking struggles. But these days, she's honed her powers and has become quite impressive as a result. Her extreme bone growth allows her to eject super durable spikes from her skin and use them in combat. She's adept at hand-to-hand combat, so this, paired with her ability to literally grow her own spikes and then heal up without issue, makes her pretty unstoppable. Now, you'd be right to think that she isn't exactly a good guy, but for a small amount of time, she was indeed a member of the X-Men until she went a little ragey on Wolverine. Number 8. Eye-Boy. Eye-Boy is usually undervalued because he looks really silly. And it's true, he does look like if Kurt Cobain had like 57 eyes all over his body. But you should never judge a book by its cover, because although Eye-Boy doesn't look very menacing and seems rather confused most of the time, he's actually got a pretty good power set which got him to be part of the X-Men. He's got the ability to see just about anything, no matter how small and no matter how far away. But on top of his microscopic and telescopic vision, he can also see basically every light wave there is, including X-ray, infrared, and thermal, among many others, including being able to see the magical plane as well. As well as night vision and even chemical detection, he can even see pheromone secretions from people, giving him a tracking ability as well. Eye-Boy is just one of those sad cases where he's just too unsettling looking to really garner much respect for who he really is and what he's truly capable of. Number 7. Nature Girl. Although Lynn Lee started off at Jean Grey's School for Higher Learning, after she witnessed some of the horrible things humanity is doing to the earth and to nature, she would instead become an ego-terrorist, fighting back against humanity, which makes sense given her powers. Nature Girl's powers are directly connected to the natural world. She can communicate, influence, manipulate, and control nature, living beings, except I guess for not humans or mutants, plants, natural phenomena like the weather and geology of the earth, and the matter and energy of which all things are composed. Now that statement alone kind of encompasses a lot of different stuff. She can call upon animals and ally herself with them. She can make plants grow, move and attack people. She can control weather to a degree and heal nature to a degree too. She was on the run from Wolverine for a while and was able to get away from him a few times using her abilities, and more recently she mutated even more and became even more uncontrollable. But she looks totally awesome wielding the Krakoan cudgel with her big antlers and these like goat legs. It's kinda cool. Number 6. Toad. Toad's biggest claim to fame would be as a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but Mortimer Toynbee has also been a part of the X-Men for some time, and was a student at Jean Grey's school. It makes sense that the X-Men would take him on given his massive list of abilities. Toad has a degree of superhuman strength, specifically in his back legs, which allows the little weirdo to jump around 25 to 37 feet, and he'll kick you so hard that you ain't getting back up again. He's got flexible bone structure, superhuman stamina, durability, reflexes, reflexes, and agility. Toad, like a lot of super beings, has a regenerative healing factor, but unlike a lot of mutants, he has UV vision, a super strong 30-foot prehensile tongue, acidic saliva, sticky paralytic resin out of his pores, and pheromone secretion. I can understand why he isn't exactly at the top of the mutant landscape, partially because he's kind of lame and gross, but he's not someone you should sleep on. Number 5. Cypher. Cypher has what some people believe to be a pretty horrible mutant ability, especially when it comes to combat. Personally, I would kill to be able to subconsciously translate any written or spoken language, human or alien. He can also subconsciously understand body language and intention, as well as decipher codes and computer languages. After he was resurrected, and also so Marvel could make him actually useful, everything he sees is interpreted into language, basically meaning that he's able to read life itself. Now, he isn't exactly a fan favorite, and his powers aren't really anything to write home about, but he was a member of the X-Men, and he was actually very instrumental in the Krakoan era with his ability to talk to the living island. Number 4. Eunice the Untouchable. Now, I gotta say, the force field abilities of wrestler, criminal, and villain Eunice the Untouchable definitely have some major drawbacks. The positives are great. His force field can withstand blows from the Incredible Hulk, he can project his force field to move objects, he could also use the shield to be untouchable, hence the name, opening it up to be able to grab things and eat. Now, the drawback would come in the fact that there have been multiple times where Eunice had his abilities increased, but to a point that he couldn't even control his own abilities. At this time, his shield would literally close him off from everything. He couldn't grab things, he couldn't eat food, he couldn't even breathe oxygen, which caused him to even pass out on one occasion, which luckily deactivated his powers, allowing him to survive. Now, maybe if he used his powers for good more often, like he did during his short stint with the X-Men, the writers would make him less self-destructive, but for now, that's just the way it is. Number 3. Morph. Morph might sometimes be underestimated because of his funny disposition and his somewhat harmless look. With one of the best personalities of all the mutants ever, Kevin Sidney uses humor to work through his internal issues after his mother's passing. But externally speaking, he deals with his other issues using his totally underrated power set. Morph is a master shapeshifter, capable of changing his body and his voice to mimic those of others. Not to mention, he's also able to fly at speeds of 40 miles per hour and has a healing factor due to his ability to manipulate the makeup of his own molecules. But what's coolest about his powers is that if he chooses to grow more muscles, his strength will actually increase along with his appearance. And even if he can't get his strength up to match his opponents, his defensive stats are insane due to his ability to absorb the impact of any physical projectiles by simply allowing them to pass straight through him. Number 2. Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not is a mutant with the incredibly unique ability to be in a state of constant existential superposition. That basically means that Forget-Me-Not is more like Forget-Me-A-Lot. Whenever he is not in direct eyeline of another person, everything about him, from his presence to any memories that involve him, just completely disappear. And that's not only things that are alive. When he is caught on camera, it doesn't even register on the footage or picture. It leaves a big noticeable distortion, which does give people a clue that he did exist, but they still can't remember that he's the one who made that happen. The same thing goes for if he uses things. So like when he uses toilet paper, you obviously see that the toilet paper has been used, which would make him a perfect excuse for when someone gets mad when you don't change the toilet paper roll once it's empty. His interactions with people do leave them with gaps in their memory, which some telepathic characters can pick up on, and leaving reminders for yourself about Forget-Me-Not do also help, which is what Charles Xavier had to do when Forget-Me-Not was a member of the X-Men team for 6 whole years. Although no one remembers that. It would be an incredibly sad life to live. You could get away with a hell of a lot, so for someone who is okay being completely alone, it's totally cool. But still, a really great quote for him goes, "It's better to do something that matters and not be noticed than the other way around," which is both really sad and also really inspirational. And coming in at number 1 today is Spike. So picking mutants for this list is pretty hard because since they are from the comic books, a large number of you guys probably know who they are and probably know that they're a member of the X-Men. But not everyone here has seen the animated show X-Men Evolution, and so you might not know about the character known as Spike. Spike, or Evan Daniels, was actually the nephew of Aurora Monroe, but his mutant powers are much different. Similar to Marrow, Evan can manipulate his bones, causing it to project through his skin to create armor armor and bone spikes that he can use as melee weapons, or he can even launch the spikes from his body as projectiles. Unlike Marrow though, Spike's bones piercing through his skin and being broken off or fired as projectiles doesn't actually hurt him, which is a huge benefit. What's super interesting though is that after some time with the Morlocks, Spike was able to make his bone spikes so hot that they were almost on fire, which actually raises a lot more questions than it answers pretty much anything.
At number 10 we have Maggot. This guy gives me the creeps, and for good reason. He basically has 2 carnivorous worms on either one of his shoulders that devour anything on command. And they don't do it just as an offensive attack, but so that they can harvest the energy of the target and return it to Maggot's stomach, offering him a temporary boost of strength and durability. Honestly, this guy could come off as cool in some weird way to some people, but to me, his powers are just too gross and too much of a hassle to even be worth it. Most superheroes just have super strength and durability as a base set of powers, and Maggot, well, he has to get his worms to eat someone just to get those basic abilities, and only temporarily too. The weirdness factor for this mutant comes from his look, but also from the strange lengths he has to go to just to get on an even keel of power to most of his peers.
Number 9. Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not basically has the power of me in high school. His abilities allow him to basically be unnoticeable, so much so that he had been on the X-Men roster for 6 years and no one remembered it. As an X-Men, he battled the Brood and fought in the Age of X story, and has honestly saved their behinds on more than one occasion before he actually first appeared in X-Men Legacy number 300 in March of 2014. He is literally both real and not real at the same time, which is a concept I am just too dumb to properly explain. He played a key role in X-Force Volume 4 number 10 in 2014 when the X-Men tried to get him to help with one of the key conflicts being quote unquote, how can they hope to find a mutant who slips out of memory whenever he leaves their sight? Only problem is, he can't control his powers at all. So how do we prove he even exists? I mean, other than him actually being legitimately written in the comics, his actions and use of things can be perceived, like his use of toilet paper, allowing people to logically conclude that he could exist. Also, his powers were shown to leave distortions on camera records. I don't know how cameras forget him, but it's a comic book, so give me a break. A few mutants could detect him, like Phantom X, who said Forget-Me-Not was overweight, which is kinda rude.
At number 8 we have Skin. First off, the name. It's like a writer coined this name at 4 AM after forgetting they had a deadline the next morning. And the powers are equally bizarre. He's basically able to stretch his skin by about 4 to 6 feet and use it to swing around or tie up bad guys. He's like Mr. Fantastic, except it's only his skin, so I imagine it's like a little less durable and he probably can't pull the guys in as strong as if they were actually his limbs. And in my opinion, the worst of it is that when Skin is just hanging out and not actively holding in his skin, it just hangs off of him at its longest length, with his skeleton staying the same size, which is kinda gross. It's like a beanbag chair but without any filling, and instead of styrofoam beads, it's a full-on skeleton and organs. He's also a nightmarish pale blue-gray, which, I don't know, they could have at least made him look healthy, you know? Anyway, Skin at number 8.
Number 7. Eye-Boy. Not the first or last mutant to be called the lamest mutant ever, Trevor Hawkins developed his mutant ability after the Avengers vs. X-Men war in Wolverine and the X-Men number 19 in 2012. And well, his mutation is that Trevor is covered from head to toe in dozens of eyes. It's creepy, it's weird, it's actually more useful than you might think. Microscopic, telescopic, X-ray, night, infrared, and thermal vision are all things he is capable of. He can also detect chemicals, is an excellent marksman, and is skilled in nonverbal communication. He can basically read other people's behaviors and body language to almost read their minds, predict attacks, and read people's histories. All Sherlock Holmes-like. He can pinpoint weak spots in machines and people, is able to see past illusions and disguises, but to top it all off, the craziest and newest addition to his powers is solar blasts, meaning Trevor can emit intense bursts of bright yellow energy and focused beams of extrastellar force that cause sunburns and radiation poisoning. So yeah, Eye-Boy looks really weird, sure, but He'll tell you your deepest insecurities and then blast you with radiation, so there's that.
At number 6 is Choir. Choir, aka Irina Clayton, wasn't ever part of the X-Men, but studied at the School for Gifted Children, which I'm gonna count for the simple reason that I wanted to talk about her. First appearing in the new X-Men issue number 119, Choir just has mouths all over her body, and the function for it is very unclear. In some cases, she's able to confuse her enemies by shouting things in all directions, but that's about it as far as I can tell. And I'm honestly not leaving anything out, that's really it. It's unfortunate because in these cases, the use of the word mutant becomes that much more accurate. Like, Choir is one of those X-Men that I feel badly for. Superpowers are supposed to be cool and make us wish that we could have them too, but this one is just, it's like a curse, you know what I mean? But honestly, that sort of goes for everyone on this list, and at least Choir seems like a competent and friendly person. So don't get me wrong, she could still have potential. Power doesn't always come from brute force, you know, it can also be achieved by becoming a good strategist or tactician, which she'll have plenty of mouths to yell orders at people, I'm sure. At least.
Number 5. Fabio Medina. Although he had thought himself and his powers ridiculous, which they kind of are, if we're being honest, Fabio Medina and his battle cry, "Gold balls!" is kind of awesome actually. Fabio can produce golden balls of different sizes that shoot out from any part of his body and make the sound poink each time they hit something. The golden balls he fires actually seem to bounce. Now, ask me why this is a useful genetic mutation. Go ahead, ask away. But prepare yourself because he gets more weird. After he moved to Krakoa with other mutants, it was discovered that Gold Ball's balls are actually infertile eggs. And if these eggs are made fertile, it could allow for unlimited resurrection of the mutant race. Yes. So, the golden balls he was firing out of his body at sentinels and antagonists were actually infertile bouncy golden eggs. I don't like this. But he did become a member of the Five that combined their powers to resurrect deceased mutants, and that was pretty cool.
At number 4 is Beak. Beak, or Barnell Bowhusk, is a creation of Grant Morrison, first appearing in his new X-Men series, and he is basically a bird person, but in a more literal sense than any of us asked for. He's got hollow bones, feathers, and a beak, and he can't even fly really, he can just glide briefly, which in my opinion it's not worth the hassle of the rest of what he's got going on. He does have talons and long range vision, so there's some kind of offensive potential there, and apparently he's really nice too, which I guess makes up for the fear he strikes in the hearts of many. I like to imagine that Beak was created accidentally when Grant Morrison pitched a character that was half bird, half human, thinking he was on the phone with his character designer, but he'd actually called David Cronenberg instead. Poor Barnell Bowhusk, I feel badly for him, honestly. Even his real name, Barnell Bowhusk? Anyway.
Number 3. Dupe. If you have not heard of Dupe, well then allow me to enlighten you. This weird looking bumpy green bean thing will put his hand on your chest. The product of a Cold War US military experiment instrumental in the fall of the Soviet Union. Somehow, Dupe is unable to learn English, and as such he speaks in a language all of his own that everyone somehow can eventually understand. Although Captain America says the US government created him in a secret weapons project, he is also apparently from a place called Marginalia. It's surprising that he is a member of the X-Men considering he isn't technically a mutant. As far as I know at least. But the most surprising thing is his list of powers. He has possible omniscience, he's strong and durable enough to do battle with and defeat Thor, he can heal from super serious wounds in seconds and resurrect himself, he is crazy fast, he has size alteration, energy projection, psionic abilities, he can perform dupish magic, and has the power of the funk. And last but not least, Dupe's body contains a nightmare dimension known as Dupe Land that he can trap people in and summon monsters from. And if you want to count it, he even has the power of looking like a really angry mix between a lima bean and a pickle. So there's that.
At number 2 is Ugly John. He's not technically part of the X-Men, okay? But he's a mutant who's been on their side for his whole run in the comics. And honestly, I just wanted to include the weirdest Marvel character I've ever heard of. He's got 3 faces. And that's it. He doesn't last for long, first appearing in New X-Men issue number 114, when he's saved by Wolverine and Cyclops from a Sentinel who captures him. After being saved from captivity, he's then probably captured again by the Wild Sentinels and is critically injured in this incident. I don't know why Ugly John is such an asset to the Sentinels, but I imagine it really tested the whole no man left behind philosophy for the X-Men. He really puts the other X-Men in some serious danger as they save him for a second time, this time with his life threatened by injury. And unfortunately for Ugly John, he's so badly injured that Cyclops actually puts him out of his misery. I know, it's very dark, but don't blame me, blame Grant Morrison. I just wish the world had at least given this three-faced mutant a break by allowing him a nicer name.
Number 1. Bailey Hoskins. How does this normal looking ginger wind up as the number 1 spot on our list? Bailey Hoskins from Earth TRN 656, otherwise known as Exceptional, was from the non-ironically titled X-Men Worst X-Men Ever 5-issue story from 2016. Now what are his powers? Bailey has the greatest power of self-detonation. He can blow up! Just once. And then he moves on to the eternal plane of death. So how do we find out about his mutant ability if he can't really use it? Well, his parents are both mutants. His mother has X-ray vision and his dad can quote-unquote fry an egg on his chest if he wanted to. Cool. They visit the Xavier Institute where Beast breaks this poor potential X-Man's young heart by letting him know his utterly depressing power. Not too long after that, when deciding to walk away from the school for mutants, his parents, the only thing he says he has left, gets stepped on by a Sentinel. He joins the school and basically fails at everything he tries to do, using a mech armor, being an intern, joining the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and the world eventually becomes an apocalypse ruled by a fellow mutant, Riches. In the end, fueled by the fact that he has been a failure his entire life, Bailey finally uses his power to bring down Riches and finally do something actually exceptional. Good job.
Number 10, Sway. I am straight up just enamored with Sway. Her abilities are truly remarkable and the backstory of her origin is both captivating and honestly heart-wrenching. Sway's extraordinary powers first emerged during her teenage years. While preparing for college in New York City, Suzanne and her parents found themselves unwittingly caught in the crossfire of a gang war. Tragically, Suzanne's parents lost their lives in this attack, but miraculously, she somehow survived. Well, thanks to her newfound ability to manipulate time. In a moment of instinct, when her powers first manifested, Suzanne halted the trajectory of the bullets that were aimed at her, saving herself. However, lacking the experience and comprehension and finesse needed, she couldn't extend the same protection to her parents, who of course, as I said, perished. Sway's unique powers grant her control over the flow of time in her immediate vicinity. She possesses the ability to rewind the temporal memory of a location, allowing her to revisit and analyze past events. Utilizing her temporal manipulation abilities, Sway embarked on a mission to track down her parents' assailants, ultimately aiding the police in apprehending the criminals responsible for the tragedy. It was during this revelation of her extraordinary powers to law enforcement that she actually came to the attention of Moira McTaggart and subsequently joined up with the X-Men. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love it when we talk mutants, be sure to let us know by clicking that like button. Number 9. Longshot. Longshot, though perceived by some as a mutant, rejects this classification himself. Believed to be a clone and potentially both the father and son somehow of Shatterstar, his existence is entangled in the peculiarities. His existence is entangled in the peculiarities of a Mojoverse-based time loop, a fate shared with Shatterstar and, to some extent, Spiral, and honestly kind of a little bit of Dazzler too, potentially. Despite Longshot being a genetically engineered mutant and clone of Shatterstar, he adamantly denies identifying as a mutant. The X-Men quickly embraced Longshot upon discovering him, and he promptly joined forces with the team in confronting Mojo. Initially grappling with amnesia, Longshot spent a significant portion of his early adventures with the X-Men attempting to reclaim his own lost memories. Number 8. Dupe. Despite Dupe's eccentric nature, his status as a mutant remains unconfirmed. His origin is honestly shrouded in mystery even at this point, leaving room for speculation that he could be a mutant, he could be an alien, or he could even be a being just from another dimension. The lack of explicit verification makes him a peculiar addition to this list, although he clearly isn't the only non-mutant to join the X-Men team, as we just established, though he might just be one of the quirkiest additions, mutant or not. Dupe has engaged in numerous adventures with the X-Men, serving as the receptionist at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning working for Wolverine. His presence on Krakoa suggests that despite his as of yet still unknown origin, he really is at home among mutants, emphasizing his enigmatic connection to the mutant world, which continues to be really strong. Number 7. Match. While you may be familiar with the Pyros, have you encountered Match? Match, also known as Ben Hamill, debuted in the New Mutants before appearing in the new X-Men series. His abilities revolve around pyrokinesis, granting him mastery over fire, which he can generate, and making him immune to fire attacks and heat. Although Match hasn't been prominently featured for a while in the comics, he actually once led the X-Men adjacent team known as the Paragon Squad. He competed for a spot on Emma Frost's X-Men team and has attended both the Xavier Institute and the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Number 6. Amanda Sefton. Amanda Sefton, initially known as Jermaine Zardos, the adopted sister of Nightcrawler, a mutant and member of the X-Men, adds a layer of unexpected, complexity to her and Nightcrawler's relationship, as also one of Kurt's significant love interests. Yeah, you heard me right. The complexity begins when, while adopting the alias Amanda, she actually investigates Kurt's actions following their brother Steven's death, which was actually blamed on Kurt. Jermaine assumes the persona of Amanda Sefton during this undercover operation, and it's during this period that Kurt basically develops feelings for her, oblivious to the fact that Amanda is, in fact, his adopted sister, Jermaine. Somehow. Known more commonly now as Amanda in the comics, she is a formidable sorceress. Now, while not a mutant, she has proven to be a valuable ally to the X-Men and actually a member of their unofficial Muir Island X-Men team. Number 5. Adam X. Enter Adam X, a noteworthy figure in the convoluted Summers family tree, and trust me, it is. We did a whole bunch of videos on it. It's complicated. As the half-brother of Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan, his lineage is tied to Catherine Summers and the Shi'ar Emperor Dakan Naramani. Although some have debated Adam X being part of the Naramani family tree and have suggested that he is also a son of Corsair and Catherine, basically making him a full Summers, I have actually seen no evidence from the comics to support this theory, so as far as I know, it's still just a theory. Debuting in the 90s, Adam X's origin story echoes the iconic characteristics of pretty much a quintessential 90s character. Abducted as a baby from a genetic lab, he was raised by Jonath, his adoptive father. His mutant abilities emerged, allowing him to internally ignite others' blood, causing intense internal burns. He can also ignite his own blood, inflicting pain, but apparently gaining a speed boost as a result. Eventually, Adam X discovers his hybrid nature, part Shi'ar, part mutant. Sounds pretty 90s to me. Number 4. Ariel. Ariel hails from Coconut Grove, an extraterrestrial planet, and possesses the mutant ability of persuasion. Additionally, her alien physiology grants her teleportation capabilities. Notably, she is connected to another Ariel, her ancestor, who visited Earth and served as the inspiration, apparently, for William Shakespeare's play The Tempest, in terms of Marvel canon. The Ariel in focus here, not her predecessor, arrived on Earth on a mission to gather mutant samples for study, as her people were intrigued by Earth's mutants' evolutionary processes. During her stay on Earth, she became associated with the Fallen Angels and later crossed paths with the X-Men in San Francisco, actually joining them temporarily. Number 3. Lifeguard. Heather Cameron, known as Lifeguard, is a mutant whose abilities activate in response to life-threatening situations, hence her codename, providing her with the necessary skills to save lives, including her own life. Her codename was initially her job title, as she worked as a lifeguard in Australia with her brother Davis. There are implications of her having an unknown Shi'ar heritage, though it was never fully explored. While she made a reappearance in Dawn of X at the Green Lagoon Bar in Krakoa, it would be exciting to witness her take on a more prominent role in the comics due to the uniqueness and utility of her powers. Honestly, she's so powerful, I don't know why she isn't featured more. Probably because she is so powerful, but still. Not enough love. Number 2. Sunpyre. You know Sunfire, but do you know Sunpyre? Sunpyre was Shiro Yoshida's younger sister, Leyu. She also had powers and an attitude similar to her brother's, and first appeared in Uncanny X-Men issue 392 in 2001. For those unfamiliar with Sunfire's abilities, both siblings possess the mutant ability of Solar Flare, which allows them to absorb solar radiation and convert it into superheated plasma. Using this ability, they could both both covered their body in flame as they became like a flying, human-shaped sun. Sunpyre can use her power to emit plasma blasts and give off intense solar heat. Leyu is one of the mutants who answered a psychic call to help defeat Magneto and save Professor X. After helping out the X-Men in that adventure, she'd later appear as a member of the X-Corps team. Number 1. Petra. Petra has the ability to manipulate rocks and rock formations. In fights, she can bind her opponents or completely destroy them by having the earth move to swallow them, and she can transform rocks into different kinds of weapons and wield them against her opponents. Petra was recruited by Moira McTaggart after being apprehended by the police. Her family died in a rock slide when she was young, which to this day Petra believes she may have accidentally caused. She used her powers to escape and basically became a runaway. Discovering her ability to turn coal into diamonds, she would use those diamonds to pay for a place to sleep, but of course this drew suspicion and she was tracked down by the police. Fortunately, as I said, Moira managed to intercept her and offered her a place as part of her team.
Coming in at number 10, it's Pickles. I think his name alone just made me want to include him on this list. Pickles is what is known as a Banff, a race of demons who are basically little Nightcrawler-like imps, who possess similar attributes and powers as Nightcrawler and Azazel. Pickles himself lived inside Beast's van and was a backup in case anyone needed immediate transport somewhere. But he would later travel with Jean Grey and the X-Men in Jean Grey #1 from 2017. As a Banff, Pickles can teleport by displacing himself into the Brimstone dimension, travel through it, and then return to the original dimension at a certain distance from the point of departure. But unlike Nightcrawler, Pickles doesn't require foreknowledge of his destination in order to safely teleport there. But much like Nightcrawler, Pickles can stick to objects with the surface of his hands and feet, and he's got a sweet little prehensile tail. This little imp also possesses an unknown degree of muscle memory mimicry, which enables him to quickly learn and perform new martial arts with little instruction or training. He's definitely one of those few minor X-Men characters, but he's just so cute. Number 9. Gazing Nightshade. First appearing in X-Men Blue #6 in June of 2017, the Madripoor mutant calling herself Gazing Nightshade was part of a ruthless mutant vigilante group who were inspired by Wolverine called the Raksha. The group was stopped by Jimmy Hudson and the X-Men and eventually were invited to the X-Mansion. Gazing Nightshade has the really cool mutant ability of despair inducement, meaning whoever Nightshade gazes upon enters into a trance-like state of sorrow, fueled by their deepest regrets. And to make it just 10 times more metal, both the eyes of Gazing Nightshade's victims and her own eyes bleed when she uses her powers. Tell me that's not the coolest thing. She joins Polaris' makeshift roster of X-Men in X-Men Blue #25 in 2018 before going back to the Raksha. Number 8. Trinary. Shilpa Khatri first showed up in 2018's X-Men Red #1 as a new mutant joining Jean Grey's team of X-Men. Shilpa was a young mutant from India who developed technopathic mutant abilities, and first used them to top up the bank accounts of every working Indian woman using the money from 25 of the biggest earning CEOs in India. That's pretty cool. And while I think that's awesome and kind of hilarious, her father did not, and he reported his own daughter to the Indian Mutant Defense Force, which is where Jean Grey and her team rescued Trinary from. As a technopath, she has the ability to psychically control all forms of technology, such as computers, cell phones, and all that junk. Her limitation at this time is that she can only control technology that is in her line of sight, and her range is currently undetermined, but judging from other technopaths, she has potential to get much stronger. It just remains to be seen. Number 7. Gabby Kinney. We included Laura Kinney on the last list, so is it cheating to use her clone? I personally say no, because Gabrielle Kinney, aka Honey Badger and recently Scout, is just awesome. Like a little feisty killing machine with adamantium bone sickles and crazy regenerative healing factor, and that also improves her strength, speed, and stamina. Gabby first appeared in All New Wolverine #2 in 2015, and she had a long history that just like her other clone sisters, intertwined a lot with Laura, her genetic sister, and Wolverine, her genetic father. As Honey Badger, Gabby was seemingly a favorite of her sister, and basically became a sidekick to Laura Kinney, joining Jean Grey's X-Men alongside her sister in X-Men Red #1 in 2018. While Laura went on to become the new Wolverine, Gabby would go on to become Scout, and one of the main Wolverine family members. Oh, also her and Jonathan the Unstoppable, an actual Wolverine, like the animal, shared an immediate bond, and he is basically her pet, which is both really cool and kind of hilarious. Number 6. Gentle. Although Nezno Abidemi, son of a Wakandan woman and a Russian man, first appeared in 2006, he was only a student at the Xavier Institute until he joined the X-Men in 2009's Uncanny X-Men. Because of his father, Gentle was never treated right in Wakanda, even by his own mom, which is a little hypocritical because, she got pregnant with a dude, but whatever. He was raised at the Wakandan royal court and was sent to the Xavier Institute by Aurora Monroe when his powers first manifested. Gentle's mutant ability is muscle mass expansion, which allows him to increase his size and strength almost instantly. He's done battle with a Sentinel, and his strength is said to rival Colossus, with his resting strength increasing every time he uses his powers. Because of his poor treatment though, he suffered from psychological trauma, which caused him to suffer great pain and seizures. To help his condition, Gentle's entire body was covered with vibranium tattoos to prevent him from overexerting, and they essentially keep him alive, with the added side effect of looking sick. Number 5. Oya. When Hope Summers came back from her future travels with Cable, there were 5 mutants whose X gene and abilities activated. These 5 were known as the Lights, and they were the first mutants since the events of M-Day, making them pretty important. Idie Onkokwo was 14 years old, living in Nigeria's Delta State when her mutant powers of thermokinesis activated, causing her to accidentally burn down her village. She was almost taken out by the military until the X-Men showed up to save her. Now, under the direction of Hope, and with the consent of Cyclops, the Lights began training as a rescue team for any other new mutant manifestations. Idie's ability of thermokinesis allows her to alter temperatures around her, with the limitation being that she cannot simply create hot or cold temperatures. She can only rechannel pre-existing temperature, meaning she needs the presence of heat to generate cold, and cold to generate heat, and vice versa. Oya first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 528 in September of 2010. Number 4. Armor. Hisako Ichiki lived in Tokyo, Japan with her brother and parents when her mutant abilities activated, and she joined the Xavier Institute. She first appeared becoming just a student and member of Kitty Pryde's Paladin Squad in Astonishing X-Men Volume 3 in 2004, and would go on to become a member of the New X-Men after participating in Emma Frost's Battle Royale in New X-Men Volume 2 number 23 and 26. But finally, she officially joined the main X-Men team in Astonishing X-Men Volume 3 number 25 in 2008. Hisako's powers are pretty cool. As you might suspect from her name, Armor can generate strong, powerful, durable, and impenetrable psionic exoskeleton armor around her entire physical body that augments her strength, endurance, stamina, agility, invulnerability, and durability. The power of her abilities are greatly tied to her family and bloodline. So, for example, the strength, power, and size of her psionic armor greatly enhances when her relatives pass away. Which, I mean, if she was a villain, that could go south pretty quick. But luckily she's not, so we're good. Number 3. Bloodstorm. This is probably a bit of a spicy choice for this list. Bloodstorm is none other than Aurora Monroe, only she is from a different universe. Earth 21710 to be specific. This version of Aurora was a thief living in the streets of Egypt when she attempted to pickpocket a man who turned out to be Dracula. She was turned into a vampire and eventually managed to free herself from Dracula's control and find new purpose among the X-Men. Unfortunately for her though, her thirst for blood overpowered her, which resulted in her ending at least both Beast and Professor X, but it could have been more. She was recruited by the Goblin Queen of Earth 91240 as one of her Hexmen, and they invaded Earth 616, where Bloodstorm decided to switch sides and help the time-displaced X-Men Blue team. She was eventually recruited to the team by Cyclops. Now this is obviously Aurora Monroe, and even if she is from another universe, she is still extremely powerful. But on top of that, she has all the powers of vampirism, including being capable of transforming her body into mist and a flock of bats, and using her gaze to hypnotize people into doing her bidding. Number 2. Genesis. Honestly, Don't know how y'all are gonna feel about this one. Evan Sabanur was created by Phantom X as a clone of Apocalypse, and as such has a lot of his powers, including superhuman strength, superhuman durability, and self-molecular manipulation, meaning Evan has total control over the molecular structure of his own body, enabling him to alter his form at will. He is able to transform his limbs into various weapons and equipment such as blades and bludgeons for combat, or rocket boots for flight, as well as being able to alter his body to change in size. Evan also has a healing factor that can regenerate from serious injury like getting gashed by Dakon's claws. And he can adapt his body to any disease or environment at will, and sometimes subconsciously. Another small, innocent ability Evan has is the potential for virtually any conceivable superhuman power ever. He once showcased fire or plasma breath when fighting Faithful John's mine drones, and also has a degree of energy projection, able to project dematerializer blasts from his eyes and emit energy blasts from his hands. He first appeared in Uncanny X-Force number 7 in 2011, but wasn't on the X-Men team until 2014, and even then, kind of as a student. As the clone of Apocalypse, Evan will potentially develop any of the powers possessed by him, but it also means people do fear him, which leaves him with a bit of an insecurity. And number 1, Darwin. Even somewhat casual fans of the X-Men know who Darwin is, if only because he was that guy who is supposed to be able to adapt to anything but gets de-lifed in like 2 seconds in the X-Men First Class movie. People were mad. And honestly, yeah, so was I. That makes no sense. Adapt to this, shut up. He literally could have. Armando Munoz, or Darwin, was first introduced in X-Men Deadly Genesis number 2 in December of 2005, and he would join the X-Men shortly after that. Darwin's powers are just the coolest. He's able to adapt to any situation, so basically, using his powers, he's been able to grow functioning gills after being submerged in water, gain night vision after being in the dark for several seconds, be able to survive without oxygen when in space, his skin has become fireproof when it's exposed to flames, and after touching Hela, Darwin became a death deity and gained powers similar to Hela, including immortality, Asgardian physiology, and control over life and death. There was even a time his intelligence increased itself to understand the Shi'ar language by looking at it in written form, although sometimes his powers do not always take the effect he wants, like, for example, during his fight with the Hulk, his body teleported him away from the battle rather than supplying a power that would actually allow him to defeat the Hulk, which is kind of hilarious to be honest. Starting off at number 10, we have Forget Me Not. I wanted to start this list off really small, with a character y'all may not know, mainly because almost no one knows him because that's his power. Appearing in 2014, Forget Me Not had actually been a member of the X-Men for several years before this, but thanks to his abilities, no one can remember him. Forget Me Not's abilities make it so that he is imperceptible in all forms, basically. The power is so good that even Charles Xavier himself had to place a psychic reminder on himself so that he would remember Forget Me Not's existence. Clearly that means some of the most powerful telepaths have difficulty discovering him, let alone remembering him. His power is to be forgotten, but the unique ways this power could be used, and the uniqueness of this power in general, will keep him in my mind. Number 9, we got I-Boy. Why is a guy named I-Boy on a list of strongest members of the X-Men? I see you, like many of the other mutants, are very judgmental. Trevor Hawkins' body is covered in eyes, 57 to be exact, which give him an array of powers that honestly, you kinda may expect. Microscopic, telescopic, X-ray, night, infrared, and thermal vision are all a part of his power list. But he can also detect chemicals, is an excellent marksman, and is skilled in nonverbal communication. He can almost read other people's minds by reading their behaviors and body language. He is an incredible tracker. He can predict attacks and can read people's histories just by looking at them. He can pinpoint weak spots in machines and people, is able to see electronic wavelengths and microwaves, is able to see past illusions and disguises as well as magic waves. He makes an amazing detective, in short. On top of all that, he can even pass what he sees onto others, but he has to be physically close enough for it to work. But to top it all off, the craziest and most unexpected power he possesses recently is solar blasts. We don't know how just yet, but Trevor can emit intense bursts of bright yellow energy and focus strongest beams of extrastellar force that cause sunburns and radiation poisoning. Coming in at number 8, it's Gwenpool. I think Gwenpool has one of the strangest powers. That would be the power of medium interaction, which is because she comes from a reality very much like ours, as in superheroes are fictional people in comic books. So, when Gwen was transported to a pocket universe that recreated her home reality, Gwen's perception of the fictional world allowed her to gain the ability to recognize and manipulate the artistic medium that she was now in. She can see and physically interact with lettering and caption boxes, and touch and even break through panel gutters, allowing her to transport objects short distances through space and time by moving them across panels, and she interacts with different instances of herself from multiple panels on the same page. Now, I don't know if you've realized this, but this kind of means Gwendolyn Poole can kind of warp reality in a way. She kind of becomes one of the most crazily powerful characters in comics, at least potentially. She first showed up in Howard the Duck Volume 6 number 1 in November of 2015, and she has actually teamed up with many different characters and teams, including being a member of the X-Men on and off again. Number 7, Laura Kinney. I know, she isn't really new as a character, but Laura Kinney, or X-23, has become the all-new Wolverine, and that is relatively new. She officially joined the X-Men as this Wolverine at the Hellfire Gala in 2021. There are a few characters with powers similar to Wolverine, and there are even a few who are clones of Laura herself. But of all these characters, Laura is certainly the best and definitely the most fan-loved. Her powers are very similar to Logan's, with her primary mutant power being an accelerated healing factor. And obviously, she also has retractable bone claws, only she has 2 in her forearms and 1 in her foot. Well, each foot. She was obviously a clone and grew up being made to be a weapon, so of course she has an extremely haunted past. But with Logan as a father figure in her life, she grew up under him, and she even did the same for Gabrielle Kinney, another clone who Laura considers to be her younger sister. She's already done so much, but I just kinda can't wait to see what else she does as Wolverine. Number 6! It's Synch. Everett Thomas isn't a new character by any means, being first introduced in 1994, but while he was a part of Generation X, he didn't officially land on the team until this newest iteration of X-Men. He was also one of the first mutants resurrected by the Five on Krakoa, due to the fact that his powers could enable him to act as a substitute for any of the Five who might need to tag out. With that said, what are his powers? Synch's powers are known as synchronistic power replication. Synch basically produces this really cool funkadelic looking aura that allows him to synchronize with other supers in his vicinity, letting him use their powers unless they leave the vicinity. But what's really interesting is that he doesn't need that person to be completely there. So if you had like a tissue sample from a superpowered person, he could sync with that and it would be enough. Since his resurrection, his powers have been amped up, giving him a limited memory bank of powers he's synced with. He became an official base member of the new X-Men team announced at the Hellfire Gala alongside Laura Kinney in X-Men Volume 5 number 21 in 2022. Number 5. Zorn. Question: what would you do if you and your twin brother developed the mutant ability of having your head become a star? Answer: I honestly don't know how you would still be alive to decide what to do in the first place. Shen Zorn and his twin brother Quan Yin Zorn both developed mutant powers that, in essence, were tiny stars that burned away and replaced their actual heads. They were both isolated, and they both wear super cool looking iron helmets with power dampeners to contain their power from doing too much damage. Shen is called Zorn with a Z, and his head is actually technically a black hole. And to keep things not confusing, Quan Yin is also named Zorn, but with an X. Okay, so what the heck can they do with their powers? Well, both of these characters can produce gravitational electromagnetism, which could actually allow them to heal others and use telepathy, and also, really weirdly, somehow allowed them to sense when people died and speak using shaking gravitational particles. Zorn, the one with a Z, could suck people into his black hole and even turn his black hole back into a sun. They could also both obviously do a lot of damage, using the power of a star to burn, blind, and incinerate people. They both became members of the X-Men at different times. X-Zorn was the first in 2002, but he wasn't always good. And his brother, Z-Zorn, joined more than a few years later. Number 4, it's Dupe. First appearing in X-Force number 116 in 2001, Dupe's origin story is kind of hard to explain, because we don't know for a fact what it is. Captain America tells us he was a US Cold War weapons project project, and he apparently had some kind of role in the fall of communism. He was originally a member of X-Force until eventually becoming a member of X-Static. For such an unthreatening character, Dupe is surprisingly strong. He has been described as being an extra-dimensional being with a genius-level intellect, bordering on possible omniscience. And he has a large array of psionic powers, one of which includes controlling Russians. He can change his size and shape at will, allowing him to heal wounds and reassemble parts of his body if they have been removed or cut off. He has an incredible level of super strength and durability as well, with an unknown limit, being able to match and overcome Thor in a fight when he was in a weakened state, taking hits from Mjolnir while he did so. He seems to be able to come back from the afterlife, and he also has a pocket dimension inside himself that he can store things in and summon creatures from. He can also completely break the fourth wall and go across the comic panels. Dupe has defeated the devil all by himself. He is overpowered, and I don't know how anyone loses with him on their team. Coming in at number 3, it's Tempest. Eva Bell first was seen in all new X-Men #1 in 2012, when we also saw her mutant powers manifest. She was out with friends and a boy when her brother showed up and began to get into a fight with that boy. The stress and duress of the situation caused her powers to pop off, and she completely froze everyone within a city block of her in time for 20 hours until the X-Men showed up, helped her, and then took her in. She's been referred to as near Omega level with her ability of chronokinesis within a time bubble, meaning she can freeze and slow down time and is one of the best at it in the world. She can also speed up time in the bubble by decades if she chooses to, which is why she is a member of the Five, to age up whoever is being resurrected. And she can even time travel. Although she has shown to lose control over this power from time to time, there is no doubt she is and can become more incredibly powerful. Number 2, Elixir. Joshua Foley, otherwise known as Elixir, is a mutant with Omega level healing abilities. He's incredibly powerful, and while originally was just considered a general threat, he can actually use his powers offensively as well, completely ending lives if he wants to. Using his mutant ability of biokinesis, Elixir is capable of controlling the biological structure of his own and other people's bodies down to the genetic level. Now this started off small, but has grown to allow him to simultaneously heal dozens of people, resurrect himself and others, and even the ability to control, manipulate, and absorb the life forces of other living creatures. Offensively, he can use his death touch to harm others, to cause different types of illness, massive swellings, and organ failure. He's even completely destroyed the body of enemies before. He is one of the core members of the Five, as I'm sure no one is surprised about, and he has been a member of the X-Men ever since he was one of the only surviving mutants who retained his powers at the Xavier Institute after M-Day, and he was trained to become one in 2006's New Mutants. Number 1! Hope Summers. Hope Summers was the first mutant born after the events of M-Day, the mutant decimation, or the day that Scarlet Witch cast No More Mutants. She was then taken into the far future and raised by Cable, being carried around in the coolest baby Bjorn you'll ever see. Not too long after, she returned to the present and her mutant powers finally activated. Her power is basically that of Omega level power manipulation. She can manipulate the powers of other mutants nearby to her, even mimicking their powers, but at full capacity and with complete control over those powers. And she can even take on multiple powers at once, but it is pretty tiring for her to do that. A large part of her role in the Krakoan society is as the leader of the Five, who use their abilities to resurrect the mutants of Krakoa. Her role on the Five specifically is both to boost their powers to their full potential and help them work in synergy with each other perfectly. She also helped terraform Mars alongside Vulcan and Proteus, giving them enough power to actually do it. She is such a cool character, and she first appeared back in X-Men Volume 2 number 205 in 2008, but was a child for much of that until she came of age and joined X-Force and the X-Men. Now the mutant armor isn't a new X-Men member in the regular 616 universe, but recently, as in this year, 2024, the year of our Lord, thanks to the newly formed Marvel Ultimate Universe and Peach Momoko, we are getting a new interesting take on her character. Ultimate X-Men number 1 stars Hisako Ichiki, Anarchy, aka Armor, as she first uncovers her mutant abilities. Now first of all, Peach Momoko sets this story in Japan, and the whole thing is just this mix of cute but also very heavy and super cool. What's interesting about this take on Armor, and possibly the other mutants going forward for the Ultimate Universe, is how their abilities appear to be a bit more magically oriented. In the story, her powers appear to be almost supplied by a strange amulet she's given by a friend who then lost his life. Now, that's just me speculating. After a shadowy presence who people are guessing may be the Shadow King appears to Hisako, she is riding her bike away from where they met, and her power activates as a car nearly hits her, and her enormous armor stops it dead in its tracks. Definitely give that first issue a read if you get a chance, cause I glossed over a lot. Next up, Joanna Cargill, like a lot of the X-Men, started off as a villain. She ran away from home after her mutant powers activated, and she caused the passing of her not so great dad in self-defense. From there, she would join Apocalypse's Alliance of Evil, which is a silly name, where she would do battle with the X-Men. Now gifted with skin that is extremely strong and resistant to attacks, Frenzy became an X-Men member in 2011 in X-Men Legacy number 250. Her steel hard skin is so strong that it has only ever been penetrated by adamantium. She is also highly resistant to extreme hot and cold, as well as radiation, and she can withstand high impact forces like Cyclops' optic beam or a punch from She-Hulk. Now speaking of She-Hulk, a byproduct of Frenzy's power is that she has super strength as well, enough to lift around 25 to 75 tons, and she can punch Jennifer Walters back if she really wants to. Frenzy has gone toe-to-toe with Rogue, arguably one of the most powerful X-Men, and she was classified as a level 6 threat by Cable, who helped hone her exceptional skills as a hand-to-hand combatant. Now going back, if you need more incentive to read that new Ultimate X-Men, then I shall give you some. At the end of the very first issue, the cover of the second issue, which I haven't actually been able to read yet, features a completely new character who goes by the hero name Maystorm. Now Maystorm is confirmed to have weather abilities and is clearly inspired by the revolutionary Storm from Ultimate Black Panther. Inspired by, but this is a wholly new character with their own unique design, and it seems the character will be joining both Armor and a few other characters that I'm going to talk about in a minute as the first new Ultimate X-Men team. Momoko created this character for last year's New Champions variant cover, but Maystorm will finally debut in Ultimate X-Men number 2 of this year. Similar to Frenzy, Quentin Quire used to be a sort of villain back in the New X-Men. He spent his earlier years being an absolutely despicable kid who I always kind of wanted to just like kick in the shins. He was trying to be an anarchist leader of mutants and ended up doing more harm than good. After the schism of the X-Men, Wolverine took him to the school that he opened up. In a relatively short amount of time, Quentin became a more well-rounded character, and now he is someone I think is actually kind of cool. He still stayed a bit of a rebel and a narcissistic jerk, which you would think would make people hate him, but when he stops trying to cause anarchy, these traits end up becoming a fun aspect of his personality. Now on Krakoa, he's back to annoying Wolverine and being pretty insufferable, but it's to a point where you kind of love him for it, maybe just a little bit. What's a little bit less fun is that recently, Quentin got his head lopped off and placed in an Orcus container designed to make use of mutant body parts by Sabretooth. Now he recently called in the Exiles for help using his powers, so we shall see where that goes. Okay, I hope y'all don't mind, but I've got another of the new Ultimate X-Men that I'm going to talk about, and their name is Nico Minoru. Now, this is where things get really interesting and leads me to believe even more that these new X-Men will find some of their origins being influenced by magic and mysticism. Nico is a Japanese magical hero who uses the powerful Staff of One, and it's very interesting because on Earth 616, Minoru is not a mutant at all. In normal canon, she is a descendant of a magical family who are part of a cult. Nico steals her parents' staff after finding out that they are part of this cult, and she uses it alongside the team of teenagers known as the Runaways. Now, with full transparency, it is unclear yet if Momoko will be retconning Nico into being a mutant, or if the blending of magic and mutation in Ultimate X-Men will see her magical bloodline coming into play, but she does appear to be a part of this new team of X-Men that is forming, which is something I am excited to see play out. Next up, Monet St. Croix has an interesting past, and her family is a big part of that. Her brother is an incredibly powerful bad dude who trapped her in a different form where she is known as Penance. As Penance, she had diamond skin, a telepathic resistance, and super sharp claws. M can even combine with her younger siblings Claudette and Nicole, but on her own, Monet is essentially a near perfect being. All her physical and mental skills are greater than the natural physical limits of peak humans, including her intuition and her genius level intellect. She can fly at supersonic speeds by sheer force of will, she can read minds, project her thoughts into the minds of others, and defensively mask her mind against telepathic intrusion, and has even displayed some telekinesis. M, or Penance, became a part of the X-Men in 2013 in X-Men Volume 4, number 7. Okay nerds, I have one more Ultimate X-Men to talk about, and then I promise we will keep talking about actual 616 heroes. Peach Pomoko's design sheets have also included two new mutants, Mori and Natsu, whose origins have not really been revealed at all, and we don't know much more than their names and their designs. However, the internet has still learned some things from that alone. The two biggest things of note about the information we have is that one of the names, Natsu, means summer in Japanese, and one of these new mutants has one blindfolded eye and one red eye, which is under some kind of visor device thing. Now Summer, as you might know, is a big name in the X-Men world, and with the red eye and all that jazz, fans believe that the character of Natsu could be a version of Cyclops or Scott Summers, or maybe a character at least inspired by Cyclops, although the design is different enough that the character will definitely stand as their own person. To be honest, that whole one eye thing is also kind of giving me Cable vibes, but I have no idea how that would even work, so for now, we're sticking with possibly Cyclops. Maybe. Now although he first appeared in 2007 and was briefly on the X-Men in 2009, as a 2018 recruit to the X-Men and X-Men Red number 4, Gentle is someone I kinda just love talking about, so I'm including him on the list. Gentle's mutant ability is muscle mass expansion, which allows him to increase his size and strength almost instantly. He's done battle against a Sentinel and his strength is said to rival Colossus's, with his resting strength increased every time he uses his powers. Gentle is a very strong and powerful mutant, but the catch is that he only uses his powers in emergencies. Because of his poor treatment he suffered as a child, Gentle suffers great pain and seizures. To help his condition, Gentle's entire body was covered with vibranium tattoos in Wakanda to prevent him from overexerting, and they essentially keep him alive. On top of that, Gentle has pacifist beliefs, but his calm, peaceful demeanor should not fool anyone because Gentle has used his abilities to halt the one Sentinel from destroying the Xavier Institute, and he's such a cool character. A listed X-Men member since 2017, Inc. sets himself apart from anyone else on this list by having the unique distinction of being a normal human being who received his powers through being tattooed by a mutant. Basically, the mutant who was the giver of his tattoos imbued those tattoos with powers, but the coolest thing about these powers is that they change into whatever tattoo he chooses to use. That's probably the worst way to explain it, so let me give some examples. Ink can make others who touch him extremely sick using a biohazard symbol tattoo that he received on his hand. He used this one on some cops who tried to arrest him in a tattoo shop when he first showed up. He gained superhuman strength from a tattoo that mimics Colossus's osmium metal skin. 2 lightning bolt symbols on his temples give him low-level telepathy. He's got a tattoo of wings for flight, an explosion that lets him explode stuff, and a caduceus symbol that lets him heal others, among other tattoos. But the real show of how powerful he can be came when he got the Phoenix symbol as a tattoo that actually gave him Phoenix powers, which is nuts. His Phoenix Force symbol tattoo allowed him to defeat the Y-Men, and he keeps all these tattoos able to use whichever one he needs in the moment. It's awesome. But last on our list today is Old Man Logan. Now, most of you know this Logan from the Amazing Old Man Logan story and reality, where basically everything is ruined. The villains rule over everything with an iron fist in this wasteland. That is a whole story that we have talked about tons of times, but after the events of Secret Wars in 2015, crotchety old Logan made his way to the Prime 616 universe when main Wolverine had bit the dust, temporarily of course. Old Man Logan stepped in and sort of not really took over his place. Now this Logan didn't have the same berserker rage and he was much wiser. The main difference was he didn't fly off the handle as often. He didn't go off on his own and do things that may have put his team in danger, and his biggest accomplishment may have been wiping out both the evil Hulk from his own world and another evil Hulk, Maestro, in Earth Prime. Unfortunately, Old Man Logan finally went to the afterlife in 2019, back in his home reality.
It's hard to have a weird backstory in the the Marvel Universe, everyone seems to have one, and yet somehow Eva managed to have the weirdest I've heard. EVA, or Eva, was grown in the body of a man. She was his nervous system in physical form. The man in question here is Phantom X, which we will get to in a second. While in her early stages, she was just a little bug-looking thing, almost like a little ship. She could fly and use electricity as a weapon. Eva now, as you may or frankly may not recognize her, has taken on a more human form. That happened when her host, Phantom X, died the first time. She mutated into the form of a human woman with silvery skin. Since Phantom X was her host at first, she always maintained a connection to him and was actually his lover. Eva's powers include electric charges, flight, she can change her size and body type, she can create powerful illusions. Additionally powerful, with Phantom X's help, she can regenerate pieces of her body should she lose them, and she is capable of being a weapon as herself. Phantom X is able to throw pieces of her that act like stun darts. Eva has about 70 appearances in total, with her last one around 2019. Now moving on to her host, Phantom X. I will admit he's been around more, around 150 appearances, which might sound like a lot, but the main X-Men in comparison have appearance counts in the thousands, so 150 is nothing. You're probably wondering how a man could grow Eva in him, manifest his nervous system into a girlfriend. Well, he was created not exactly 100% human, more like a human cyborg. He was part of the Weapon Plus project, and he actually goes by many names: Mutant Man of Mystery, Charlie Cluster 7, and Le Phantom X. See, Phantom X likes to use a French accent, a bad one, allegedly, because he knows it annoys people. There might also be additional reasons for it if you choose to believe him. According to Phantom X, he grew up in a virtual France and it wasn't perfect, so that's why he loves the French but is not a perfect Frenchman. Phantom X's powers include Eva, a healing factor, super intelligence, super strength, he is scent free, so very hard to track, and literally believes he is the best. He can't see anything as better than him or he will have a mental breakdown, I am not kidding. This extreme X-Men is catching waves but not a break. Slipstream, or Davis Cameron, was just your average Australian guy surfing, vibing, live, laugh, loving, but soon he would not be doing any of those things except living. He is alive, a win is a win. Slipstream, because he is a surfer, used a hoverboard as his means of transportation. His mutant ability was the ability to form quantum portals, also known as warp wave. The portals were used for transport over large or small or just any distance on Earth, and they could be used by anyone. Slipstream went a while not knowing he was a mutant. It wasn't until the X-Men showed up and told him and his sister Heather that the two were the children of a crime lord, and then Heather later revealed she was a mutant, so of course Slipstream had to get his powers activated by Sage. He helped the X-Men fight against alien invaders but was hurt pretty bad. When he left the hospital, he disappeared for a while but then showed up to fight off some people attacking Krakoa, so eventually he ended up there. Honestly, some of these mutants haven't exactly disappeared, they just don't get storylines after theirs is over, and they're usually only remembered by Marvel when they need extra mutants to fill out a scene, you know? Like, oh, Slipstream was in this battle, cool, great, but like, how is he doing? Mentally, how is he? Anyway, Slipstream has about 19 appearances total. Sister to Slipstream and Golden Girl, literally, Heather Cameron is Lifeguard. The Golden Australian Princess, she is all of those things, we'll get to the Golden Princess in a second, found out she was a mutant before her brother did. She, with Storm and Thunderbird, defeated some attackers, and that's when she discovered the mutant powers. And it's a really useful one too. She can clock what the present danger is to her or those around her, and her body will modify itself automatically to give her the right powers to save the day. So her power is like really fast adaptation. Some powers she has gained while confronted with danger include golden skin, told you we'd get there, extra arms, gills, wings, a fishtail to live her H2O, just add water dreams, and extra strength. So we've acknowledged the golden skin part, let's cover the princess thing. Lifeguard was on a mission to infiltrate a spaceship that belonged to an alien race. While doing that, Heather's appearance changed to the appearance of the alien race, and her DNA switched around, and people think she may have been of royal alien descent based on the markings on her. Her brother couldn't handle the alien look, unfortunately, that his sister was sporting, and he disappeared, so she was looking for him for a long time. Eventually, both siblings ended up on Krakoa. Lifeguard's name comes not only from her lifeguarding mutant powers, but also from the fact that she was a lifeguard back when she didn't know she was a mutant. In total, she also has about 19 appearances. Ariel the alien is an icon and a fashion icon, bring her back. back. Her original design was this epic 80s fit, just lots of colors, and even in her redesign she's still full of color. She hails from this place called Coconut Grove, and it looks like your average nightclub. All the aliens there are capable of teleportation using doors. If there are no doors, too bad. Ariel is special and different though. She is a mutant in her world. She has the additional power, a power passed down through her family, of super persuasion. She is described as she who speaks like water running across the stones. Ariel can make people do or think almost anything she wants using her charming, persuasive voice. Ariel ended up in San Francisco at one point and then joined the X-Men and stayed affiliated with the team since. In total, Ariel has about 18 appearances. I feel like Coconut Grove is a vibe and sounds like a Mario Kart track, but if I could, I would transport myself there. Let me know in the comments where you would choose to transport yourself. Changeling is a forgotten man despite his major contributions to the Marvel Universe. The biggest thing he did for Marvel was die as Professor X, so even his big moments weren't fully him. Changeling is a shapeshifter. He has become many people, but two really stick out. One was Elvis in the middle of a car chase, and the other was Professor X. Changeling wasn't always an upstanding citizen. He was a bit of a menace at first, but a cancer diagnosis and a few months left to live changed the Changeling's whole perspective. He now wanted to do better in his last few months, so he went to Professor X. Professor X gave him quite the chance. Pretend to be him while he goes underground to prepare for an alien invasion. This worked for a while, and it had its perks for Changeling too. Before becoming the Professor, Changeling had telepathic abilities, but they were limited. When he did become the Professor, he needed more power in that department in order to fool everyone, so Professor X gave him a major power boost. As Professor X, Changeling passed during a battle with Grotesque. He was brought back to life for a brief stint for a She-Hulk storyline, that's when the Elvis thing happened, but in the end died again. Another version of this character does exist out there, and he does kind of eclipse this version. He was revamped, he got powers and better storylines, and a new name, Morph. But at his core, he is a shapeshifter, and the OG version had about 17 appearances total. Most duos that we've seen on this list are equally as known as the other. Not here though. You might have heard of the X-Men Sunfire. Well, he has a sister, also an X-Men. She's named Sunpyre, and she has way less panel time with only about 7 appearances in comparison to her brother's 247. A reason for this could be that Sunpyre didn't know she had mutant abilities for a long time. We actually didn't see her discover them, but we do know it took a while for them to appear. Her powers, shockingly, have to do with the sun. She can absorb solar radiation and coat her body in fire. She can generate powerful blasts of energy known as plasma blasts. She can fly, she can create a very hot force field around herself that can melt incoming bullets, and she can sense heat signatures. She was part of the X-Men team for a brief moment, helping them retrieve Professor X from Magneto, but after that mission, she was done, she was gone. A very cool character that has a suspiciously low appearance count. I guess for Marvel, she's too hot to handle. Time-controlling mutants are common, but each one still deserves the time of day, including Sway. So Sway controls time, but you probably got that from my first sentence. Her time-controlling capabilities are for stopping time and making time replay. So it's not like going back in time, but instead she can go back to a spot and see like a phantom of what happened there, replay the events. What's cool about that is that other people can see the phantom images too. Her stopping time originally meant that everything stopped, but with training, she was able to stop select objects and everything else would be fine. Sway was originally Suzanne Chan, and her backstory is tragic. When is an X-Men backstory not, right? Her mutant ability manifested while out with her parents. Her family was caught in the crossfire of some bad people. Sway unconsciously stopped the bullet aimed at her, but because she didn't know she could do that, she couldn't save her parents. She was in and out of places that could not help her, but then found the X-Men. Well, the X-Men found her, kind of. Professor X needed to save the X-Men from Krakoa because it's not a safe space for mutants at that moment. He took her and 3 others and created a little team to get the original X-Men back. The island is where Sway met her demise, and now she's only appeared in minor appearances and is generally not the first mutant people think of when you ask, with only about 5 appearances in total. Sway, of course, made some friends while on that little X-Men team, and one was Petra, meaning rock in Greek. Petra handled all things Earth, so geokinesis. She rocks, literally. She can manipulate rock into different shapes, even Sword's Minecraft queen in real life. She can also cause earthquakes and create holes in the earth, not like the center of the earth kinda deep, always. Sometimes it's just a little one is enough to incapacitate someone. She can also change the state of a piece of earth, like creating diamonds from coal or making glass from sand. Again, she is a Minecraft character in real life. Dust clouds, telekinetically flying on rocks, and consistency manipulation are also in her power set. The consistency thing is making the earth like wiggly or soft or smooth or all the opposite of those. Like Sway, Petra has a traumatic backstory. She accidentally caused her entire family to experience the fatal effects of a rock slide, and then she became an orphan and was placed in a foster home. Her foster father acted inappropriately towards her, but she trapped him in the ground, good for her. She went on the run, hiding in caves, a run-in with the police, and some training with Moira McTaggart later, and our girl was on the reserve X-Men team with Sway. She also met her end on the Mutant Island. Like Sway, Petra is also not at the forefront of most fans' mind with only 5-ish appearances, but that doesn't mean she didn't rock. I've heard this guy described as paste for plot holes. Apparently, he's been around since the beginning, helping out with major X-Men missions, but his horrible mutant ability means literally no one knows because they all forgot. We all forgot Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not literally is a mutant with the power of being forgotten. Even machines forget he's there. He was trapped once by a machine, but then it forgot he was there and he was able to escape. Though he is forgotten, he still exists. Obviously, if he drinks some orange juice, people can see the orange juice is gone, they just won't remember who did it. After missions with him, the other X-Men would be left with gaps in their memory. Eventually, Psylocke was able to put a part of the puzzle together. What's really tragic about Forget-Me-Not is he literally sacrificed himself to save Krakoa from Nimrod, and no one remembers. In total, Forget-Me-Not has about 14 appearances, and I just totally forgot who we were talking about. I'm kidding. Forget-Me-Not, I will not forget you.
Now when I say the name Pyro, most X-Men fans will think of St. John Alderdice, who has been around since the 80s, but that's not who I'm talking about today. Simon Lasker is the newest version of Pyro, debuting in 2017. When Lasker first manifested his mutant powers, Mesmero appeared to him in the form of Charles Xavier and brainwashed him into taking the name Pyro and joining a new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And this group of mutants were defeated by the X-Men and the brainwashing was broken. From there, he went on to join the X-Men Blue Team. Lasker's powers were very similar to the original Pyro, with the only difference being that he could generate his own flame, not needing an existing flame for him to control. Unfortunately though, the character went to the Pearly Gates in 2020, not to be seen since. Meanwhile, the original Pyro went on to join the Krakoan Marauders. Debuting in Wolverine and the X-Men Volume 2 #1 in March of 2014, Lynn Lee, aka Nature Girl, started off at Jean Grey's School for Higher Learning. When Kitty Pryde relocated the X-Men to Central Park and the school was renamed to the Xavier Institute for Mutant Education and Outreach, Lynn Lee decided to join in. She became part of Jubilee's X team in Generation X Volume 2 #2 in 2017. But after she witnessed some of the horrible things humanity was and is doing to the Earth and to nature, she instead became an eco-warrior fighting back against humanity, which makes sense given her powers. Nature Girl's powers are directly connected to the natural world, so she can communicate, influence, manipulate, and control nature, animals, plants, and natural phenomena like the weather and geology of the Earth. She was on the run from Wolverine for a while and was able to get away from him a few times using her abilities, and more recently, she mutated even more and became even more uncontrollable, but she looks pretty awesome, so we can let that kind of thing slide. Debuting in Powers of X #1, which released in early 2019, Rasputin 4 is one of the more interesting recent additions to the X-Men, but she's also one of the most overpowered. Created as possibly the most powerful of Mr. Sinister's chimeras, which were basically spliced together mutants who possess more than one hero's power, Rasputin 4 possesses 5 different powers. 5. She has the osmium metal skin of Colossus, the telekinesis and telepathy of Quentin Quire, the force fields of Gunther Bane, aka Unis the Untouchable, the intangibility of Kitty Pryde, and just to top it all off, she has the healing factor of X-23 Laura Kinney. So as you can imagine, she is a force to be reckoned with. And on top of that, she wields the Soul Sword. Currently, as far as I've read, Rasputin 4 is working pretty closely with Charles Xavier to fight back against Orcus and others during the fall of X. Now, while she was initially controlled by Sinister, he himself undid that, and together the two actually saved the entire universe, with Rasputin doing most of the heavy lifting. Shilpa Khatri first showed up in 2018's X-Men Red #1 as a new mutant joining Jean Grey's team of X-Men. Now, Shilpa was a young mutant from India who developed technopathic mutant abilities, and she first used them to top up the bank accounts of every working Indian woman using the money from 25 of the highest earning CEOs in India. While I think that's pretty awesome and kind of hilarious, her father did not, and he reported his own daughter to the Indian Mutant Defense Force, which is where Jean Grey and her team rescued Trinary from. As a technopath, she has the ability to psychically control all forms of technology such as computers, cell phones, and all that junk. Now, her limitations at this time is that she can only control technology that is in her line of sight, and her range is currently undetermined, but judging from other technopaths, she has potential to get much stronger. Trinary was one of the mutants recorded to X-Corps by Mirage following the mutant massacre at the Hellfire Gala. With WizKid, Trinary helped to run X-Corps Island and keep it cloaked away from Orcus. Next up, Eva Bell first was seen in All New X-Men #1 in 2012, when we also first saw her mutant powers manifest. She was out with her friends and a boy when her brother showed up and began to get into a fight with said boy. The stress and duress of the situation caused her powers to just pop off, and she completely froze everyone within a city block of her in time for 20 hours until the X-Men showed up, helped her, and took her in. She has been referred to as near Omega level with her ability of chronokinesis within a time bubble, meaning she can freeze and slow down time and is one of the best at it in the world. She can speed up time in the bubble by decades if she chooses to, which she uses as a member of the Five to age up whoever is being resurrected, and she can even time travel. Although she has shown to lose control over her powers from time to time, there is no doubt that she is and can become more incredibly powerful. Although initially introduced in 2010, Jimmy Hudson was actually the son of Wolverine and Magda Lencher, but crucially in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. Now, he would go on to join that universe's X-Men as Wolverine following the passing of the original Wolverine, but then, following the events of Secret Wars, Jimmy found himself within the main Marvel Universe in X-Men Blue #5, where he is tracked down in the Canadian wilderness by the time-displaced original X-Men, who he attacked, believing they were working for Mr. Sinister. After fending off an attack by Sinister's new team of Marauders, the X-Men offered him a place on the team. Now, Jimmy would remain a part of the team throughout the series, aiding them in various different missions, such as an adventure in outer space that saw him bonded with the Poison symbiote, and those two have been having a bit of an identity crisis. Although he had thought himself and his powers ridiculous, which they kind of are if we're being honest, Fabio Medina, aka Egg, and his battle cry Gold Balls is kind of awesome. Debuting in 2013, Fabio can produce golden balls of different sizes that shoot out from any part of his body and make the sound poink each time they hit something, and it is hilarious. The golden balls he fires actually seem to bounce. Now, that's pretty odd, but these gold balls are actually more useful than initially thought. After he moved to Krakoa with the other mutants, it was discovered that Gold Balls' balls are actually infertile eggs, and if these eggs are made fertile, it could allow for unlimited resurrection of the mutant race. So yes, the golden balls he was firing out of his body at Sentinels and bad guys were actually infertile, bouncy golden eggs. Does it make me slightly uncomfortable? Yes, but he did become a member of the Five that combined their powers to resurrect deceased mutants, and that was really cool. Next up, Gabby Kinney, aka Scout, also at one point known as Honey Badger, may be young, but she has more than proved herself when she became a part of the X-Men in 2018. Scout is just awesome. Like a little feisty killing machine with adamantium bone sickles and a crazy regenerative healing factor that also improves her strength, speed, and stamina. Gabby first appeared in All New Wolverine #2 in 2015, and she had a long history that, just like her other clone sisters, intertwined a lot with Laura Kinney, her genetic sister, and Wolverine, her genetic father. As Honey Badger, Gabby was seemingly a favorite of her sister and basically became a sidekick to Laura Kinney, joining Jean Grey's X-Men alongside her sister in X-Men Red #1 in 2018. While Laura went on to become the new Wolverine, Gabby would go on to become Scout and one of the main Wolverine family members. Also, her and Jonathan the Unstoppable, an actual Wolverine, like the animal, shared a pretty immediate bond, and he is basically her pet and sidekick, which is just so cool to me. Becoming an X-Men member in 2012 in New Mutants Volume 3 number 45, Blink is the mutant leader of the Exiles, a group responsible for the repairing of timelines and worlds of the multiverse. She has the gift of teleportation, but unlike characters like Nightcrawler, Blink's teleportation abilities work through portals. This is really useful as she can teleport a whole group of people, and she can teleport others specifically through the use of javelin-like energy that she can throw at whatever or whoever she wants to teleport. These javelins can also be used to make opponents unconscious when it hits them. She is an exceptional fighter, having trained under Sabretooth, and she needs that skill, especially as she leads the Exiles. Also, fun fact, she had her live-action debut in the X-Men Days of Future Past movie. During that super awesome intro where the X-Men fight the Sentinels, Blink is the mutant throwing all the pink portals around and being awesome, until she got. Then she stopped. And last up for today, Multiple Man is an interesting choice for this list, as he has been around for a really long time in comics, but while he has been a hero for a good chunk of that time, he is still only a recent addition to the X-Men. Multiple Man was recruited in 2019's Uncanny X-Men Volume 5 number 13. Jamie or James Madrox is actually a changeling, which is sort of like a genetic precursor to mutants who gain their abilities at birth instead of having their X gene activated later on. For James, his power is that of duplication. He can duplicate himself multiple times upon impact, and each of his dupes can create one single dupe of its own. One of the real benefits of this power though is that Prime Madrox will retain any memories of any of his dupes. So let's say you have to read like 10 books in a week. Well, you could have like 10 dupes all read one book each, and then when they re-merge with you, you have all their memories of each book. Multiple Man is like an information gathering powerhouse, but he can also use his ability to learn skills, like one of his dupes trained as a Shaolin monk and trained in meditation. One was a trained EMT, one audited an anatomy class for 6 months, one passed the New York bar exam, and one claimed to be the world's greatest detective. He's definitely one of my favorite mutants.